If your creative push has helped you, you can help the show by shopping on Amazon.com. All you have to do is head to yourcreativepush.com/Amazon. That will take you right there, and you can shop how you normally would. A small percentage of your purchases will go directly to helping cover the costs of creating, hosting, and maintaining your creative push. And especially with the holidays coming up, you can make a big difference just by buying the things you were going to anyway. Again, that's yourcreativepush.com/Amazon, and thank you for thinking of the show and for helping out. Your Creative Push, episode 270.
You are this new, completely unique thing in the world. Never forget it.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Gwenn Seemel. You might remember Gwenn back from episodes 26 and 27. She is a full-time artist, portraitist, and free culture advocate. And she comes back on the show to give us a bit of a recap as to where she's been since she was last on, as well as some of the unique things that I've gained from following her since she's been on. She talks about making political art and tapping into the power of anger and voicing your opinion through your art or your feelings through your art, and also the kind of interesting experience of attempting to make art for an anti-audience. Gwenn also talks about some practical things, like scams in the art world. They are a real thing that you need to be looking out for, so she gives her advice as to how to look out for scams as well as how to handle scams. She gives her tips for promotion and social media, and also talks about the power of taking photographs and documenting your own journey of you doing the work and sharing that story. She also talks about her promotional calendar and the importance of posting something every day, and also how your surroundings and your physical setting actually affects your art and how you see the world. And finally, she talks about discrimination in the art world and some of her own personal experiences with discrimination, and she wraps it up with another amazing final push. But overall, a very inspiring episode as well as a very useful episode for you with tons of tips that you might not have thought about before. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy my latest conversation with Gwenn Seemel. Gwenn, welcome back to Your Creative Push.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Yay! No, it's so I've been meaning to have you back on for a long time because since you were on like almost 2 years ago, you were one of my first interviews and one of my favorites as well.
You say that to all the interviewees.
I do not. I had you as a best of episode.
You did. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But I've been following you on Patreon very closely, and you just keep putting out great stuff. Great stuff for people who listen to this podcast, like just stuff for people that are starting out or things that people don't think about as well. And it's just like a really motivational thing for me. I'm not a visual artist, but like I love like kind of checking in with you and tuning in with you. And I've been meaning to have you on, so it's great to finally have you back on and speaking with you again.
Yes, thank you.
Of course. So I had a few things that I wanted to talk about, and I was hoping to maybe let's get the ugly stuff out of the way first, because I kind of wanted to talk about Trump.
Okay.
and like politics and kind of your thought process on the whole election. I think it very much matches with my whole thought process. But for people that kind of have something that they want to say, but maybe they're kind of they don't want to get into politics, but they still want to like kind of speak their mind. I was wondering if maybe you could kind of talk about your experience with basically the past year, 2 years, with kind of like politics and your opinion on it, and then like how it kind of translates into your art.
Yeah. Okay. So to begin with, I do a lot of portraits. I always have from the beginning of my career. And to begin with, like even before he was elected, I was like, I'm not going to draw him even. I am not going to give him that space in my mind. Like I was like, he needs less attention. I was doing that. That was where I was at. And for a while it was good for me. Like I liked having that control and saying no to that and sort of keeping it away from my art in that way. And then at some point I was like, well, this is taking over my brain completely. So not letting it out of my brain and onto the page is actually being detrimental. And so at that point I started making drawings of him. And then for me, the point where I just was broken by him and by his cronies and by what they're doing was Charlottesville. I mean, there was plenty to upset me before that, but that was the spot where I was like, this is so wrong. Specifically the white supremacists marching and saying things like Jews will not replace us and using tiki torches. That was where I was like, okay, I cannot not say anything really overt. Because before that, I had been making commentary through my art, but it was a lot more indirect. That was what I was comfortable with. That's what I wanted to do. And at that point, I was like, I am making a portrait of Trump. And I thought it was going to be my one portrait of him because I didn't still want to give him too much attention. And so I painted him as a tiki torch specifically because I had a friend who had let me know years before she'd been studying Pacific Island religions and stuff. And she let me know that the whole tiki craze of decoration is actually pretty offensive to that culture. And so it's kind of perfect that these white supremacists had adopted it, this brand that is like so supremely insensitive, and that a lot of people still don't know is insensitive. Like they're not aware that this is actually a culture that's been appropriated. And
yeah, I did not know.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to do this. I did it in like 12 hours. It just came out of me. And for me, that's a really big deal because my art takes a long time, like months and months, sometimes years. So for something to come out of me like a full-on painting in 12 hours, like from idea to finished painting was huge. And I was like, wow, this anger thing, maybe this is something I need to tap into more because this is powerful, being able to just get it out of me. Like, yeah, right. Feel the power of the dark side. But ultimately, so that painting got a lot of response from people who have similar opinions to you and I. But it also came to be loved by a handful of Trumpers in my life, the ones who hadn't abandoned ship already. And they took my painting as like a positive commentary on their man, their dude, their daddy, Trump. And we're like, you made him look like the Terminator. He's so evil. It's awesome. I was like, I can't even process why you think that's good. And they didn't just use the painting, like put it on their Facebook or put it on their like screensavers or whatever they were doing with it. They would also have to tell me about it. It was like they had to let me know that they were using my art in a way that they were certain that I wouldn't like. And I was horrified and fascinated by people having to sort of rub my face in this use of my work that I wouldn't like. Not that I would try to control it, but it was just like, wow, you're specifically trying to hurt my feelings and you're doing a really good job. So that inspired me to make another Trump painting. And that one did not take 12 hours. It took, it took at least 2 months. A much more complex painting. And it was a weird thing and something I'd never done. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but usually when I make an artwork, I have an audience in mind, like just a general, it's thoughtful people and, bold people. I like feminists, I really get into talking to other feminists, that sort of stuff. So those are the people I have in mind. Right. Mm-hmm. And, but with this portrait, the second portrait of Trump, I was like, I need to also be thinking of the people that I want to have be offended by this. Like the Trumpers who had appropriated my first one, I didn't want them to be able to be like, yes, this second portrait is even better, And
you want to make sure they know.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never had an anti-audience for artwork, like people that I specifically wanted to upset with the artwork, and not in like a growthful kind of way, like upsetting as in like challenging, but just like full on like, I want them to see nothing of value in this.
Right.
It was weird, but actually really good. And it pushed me to places that I didn't even know, like it was a peeling back of layers. I don't know if that resonates with you as a creative, like where you're sort of showing more and more of yourself. And so, for example, the second Trump painting, he's holding a syringe full of bullshit. I don't know if I can say that on your show, but
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely you can.
So it has a
syringe full of bullshit.
Yes, it has a symbol of a bull on it pooping. Yeah. And I was raised Catholic, and I'm not religious anymore, but I was raised Catholic. I was raised in Catholic schools. I was also raised to just be like a good little girl, you know? And so painting a bull shitting was a huge deal for me. I know it sounds maybe like not that big of a deal, but for me, it was like, I'm crossing a line that I didn't even realize was there. And, so I'm not saying that I'm grateful to Trump and to the chaos, the utter chaos that he has thrown our world into, he and his friends. But, I do think that there is value in exploring the crap that he has created, like letting it filter into your work. And maybe it's not something that like, it's not like I'm going to share all the drawings I made of him. Like it's, you know, a lot of it was processing, and maybe not every artist wants to share, you know, super negative art. It is angry art. But I think that there's value in exploring it. You know, I don't know. That's what I found anyway. How about you?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, I think that what you said too is like drawing or writing or doing whatever for like an anti-audience, it like allows you as an artist to kind of explore different realms. And like you said, you get to tap into different things that you wouldn't tap into normally, even though it's coming from a place of anger, or even if like that audience might never see it, you might never like share it.
Yeah.
It's like really a good way of kind of coping, but also a way of like pushing yourself to kind of try new things and get new tools in your tool belt, using it as like a negative force as like a positive force.
Yes. Yes.
And I love the idea of the anti-audience too, just like pushing yourself into a different kind of realm and just like being like, okay, like I'm usually writing for like hippies, like that's what I think sometimes, or like, yeah, I'm writing for like people that are like nerding out on outer space, or people that just like humor, you know what I mean? Like, and just like going into a completely different direction, like something that you would never do before because of this guy that you like either loathe or, you know, this audience, these people that don't quite understand like exactly what you're trying to put out there. I don't know. It's like kind of important to do that.
Yeah, I think it's good to, and I know not every artist feels this way, but I think it's good to think of art as communication, as that conversation, as that back and forth. And some artists, I think, prefer to view it as self-expression, like they're not influenced by their audience. And that's fine if that's how you view it. But I do think that there's value in like sort of stepping over to the communication side, or if you're like me, who's more into the communication side of art, like sometimes stepping into self-expression, which is what the Trump paintings were as well. Like I wasn't as interested in what people would think of them. I just needed to do it, you know?
It's also like, it's a perfect example, your example of how art is interpreted by different people, different ways, like completely different ways. And it kind of takes the pressure off of you then when you're like, this thing's like so precious to you and you want to like say exactly, like you want to get your message out there, but like you kind of have to like, once you put it out there, like let go, because people are going to take it however they want. They're going to take it as like, oh, this is great. This is our guy. He's like the best. He's like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's like the Terminator. People are going to interpret everything you do differently. So it's like, it takes the pressure off of you a little bit. Like you say what you can, you say what you want. A lot of people will resonate exactly how you meant to have this thing out there, but people will take it a different way. And sometimes that's like a really positive thing for those people too.
Well, I think it's actually what it comes down to is defining what success means for an artwork for you as an artist. I have a theory as to what makes a successful artwork for everybody. I don't know if maybe I'll put it out there and see how people think of it. But I believe that a truly successful artwork is one that people feel like belongs to them more than maybe to you. Like they feel like they're supposed to appropriate it and make it what they want it to be. And I think you've seen this with your show to some degree, like with the community that you have going on Facebook, like people view it as their thing and they're making it into something that's really a part of their lives. And I think that is, you know, showing what is truly successful is when it's not yours anymore. Not to say that you don't exist, because some of the people who appropriated the original Trump painting, one of them in particular was like, oh, art is just in the interpretation and deal with it, you know? And I was like, no, you can't just write me out. Like I'm here, you know?
Hello.
So it's not to say that the artist should step back completely or pretend like they don't matter anymore. But I think that, you know, figuring out what your definition of success for an artwork is important. And I think that a part of that is always going to be when someone's like, yeah, artist. Oh yeah, they're there, but this is mine. You know, it feels really like it's mine.
Right. It's exactly why, like, if I find a new band or something like that, like, or a new, like, musical artist, I almost get upset when they like really take off. You know what I mean? Like if I find them when nobody else knows about them and like they're mine, you know, like that's like my thing. And then like suddenly they're on Saturday Night Live and I'm like, damn it.
They're cheating on you with secret. All these other people.
No, it's so true.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about also, you talked about scams. And I think this is something that people don't think about, especially people that maybe haven't started making money with their art, and then all of a sudden they get an email or an opportunity that just seems perfect because it's kind of playing exactly on their emotions of like, will I ever make money from my art, or will like this stuff take off? And I think that's when people are most vulnerable to scams. So you had a wonderful kind of post and video about this. So maybe could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, this might not be news to everybody, but it continues to be news to me every time it happens. There are bad people in the world. They exist. Or I guess maybe not. They're not always completely bad, but there are people who do bad things on a regular basis and don't feel bad about it. And every time this happens, like, I'm like, really? Is that really what you're doing? Like, I really have to, sit and think about it. Like, are they really being mean? Mm-hmm. Is that what they intend to do? So I think that's the sort of the basic thing to keep in mind as an artist is that there are a lot of people out there who maybe they don't want you to succeed. Like they're not thinking like actively like, I hope that she does well, but they're mostly like not trying to see you fail. But there are people who don't care about your well-being at all and will leverage, like you said, the fact that you may be wanting something for your career, and they're like, I can use those feelings that person is having of like, what could I be doing with this work, and leverage that to make money off of you. So I think it's important to know that there are bad people or people who do bad things, but also that we are all vulnerable to this. And the way that scammers function is that they play on stuff that's already going on inside of you, your desires, but also your social nature. The way that even if your art is just about self-expression, you are looking for validation. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that validation. It's part of being a social creature. You need to know that you have an effect on the world around you in order to feel complete to some degree. And obviously for different people, it's different amounts, but we are all looking for that validation. The people who are like, no, for example, like I would take care of my family even if they never said thank you or showed me that they cared. And I'm like, no, you're still receiving validation from society as a whole that says taking care of your family is the right thing to do. You're always getting validation from somewhere for the things that you're doing, even if you don't necessarily understand what the source is. And so that's going to be a huge influencer on what you do. And scam artists, they understand the human being very well. And they're using their understanding for negative things, but they understand a lot about us, and we can actually probably learn a lot about how to promote our work from them. Like, for example, don't be bossy like they are. I think that a lot of marketing today, there's this feel like, oh, you should be assertive and you should this and you should, maybe you should, and maybe that works for you. But there's also a lot of scammers use language that's very dominating and very like, buy now, in the next 30 minutes and you this and that sort of thing. They're trying to force you to make a decision quickly about whatever it is, however they're trying to scam you. And when marketers use those same things, there's a reason why they're using them, because it does work on people. But let's also remember that it's crappy. Like, it's crappy to manipulate people like that. So learn, things to not do from them. And yeah, I don't know if that was a good summary of the video. The video I feel like is better. Go watch the video on my blog.
Yeah, we'll link it in the show notes page. yourcreativepush.com/Gwenn returns.
Gwenn returns.
Gwenn with 2 N's. Yes, it's epic when guests come back on. It's like a triumphant return, or an evil maybe return. I don't know. We'll see how this goes. But what do you do then when you get like an email like that, or you get kind of an opportunity like that, and you're not sure? You're like, either this is too good to be true, or like, I'm not sure if this person's bullshitting me. Mm-hmm. Like what would your advice be to somebody who is kind of on the fence about whether this person is for real or not? Because there are opportunities where somebody is like very flattering. They reach out to you and they're like, I want to buy your work. And you're like, yes. And it's like a truly real thing. So how do you know the difference?
Well, first things first, if someone is asking you for money, for you to outlay money, whether that's they're buying your work, and usually the scam is they're trying to get you to front money to deliver the painting to them, and then they end up not paying you back for whatever it is. It's some kind of scam like that. So if they're asking you for money up front like that in an art purchasing situation, or if they're asking for money up front for like promoting your work, putting in a book and a movie or that sort of thing, that's a red flag. Like most people who contact you who are, looking to purchase your work aren't going to try to get money out of your pocket at any point. They're going to be putting it into your pocket. That's just how that works. And then if it's for an opportunity, I had a conversation recently with someone and I was complaining about like even the, there's fees to apply to juried shows a lot. And sometimes the fees are like $3,500. Like that's a lot of money, not 35 or 100. I'm not saying 3,500. But anyway, that's a lot of money if you're, applying to a lot of these shows. And this artist I was talking to was like, well, the higher the fee, the more prestigious the show. And I was like, oh no, do we really think that? Like, this is bad that artists are actually believing that. The truly prestigious, like the institutions that you probably want to be a part of or be working with are the ones that have funding, outside funding, so they don't actually have to ask artists to pony up to pay the juror. So just keep that in mind, and you're going to decide whatever you're comfortable with putting out money as far as like the juried shows. Like a lot of people think that I'm wrong about that. They think that the juried shows are great and it's the way to go. But just be aware that as soon as someone's asking you for money, as well as for your art, whether to show it or to purchase it, there's something scammy going on there, even if it isn't a total scam. So that's the first indication that you might be in trouble, I think, with the person. And then it's what I was saying about, using language that's dominating. They're going to try to get you to move quickly so you don't have time to think about stuff. They're going to behave as if you don't know something. They're going to sort of be condescending. Like if you ask a question, they're going to say, oh, well, this is how this works. Don't you know this? And then you're going to feel bad because you didn't know it. I would love it if we lived in a world where when people were duped by scammers, they just straight up said like, this person scammed me, like just published it. But we're too worried about our own reputations to do that. And it ends up hurting all of us. I don't know how to change that. I just want to live in that world where people can be like, yeah, this happened to me, and not have everyone say, oh, well, you were a sucker, one born every minute. And it's like, no, We're all suckers. Like, let's be all suckers together and admit when we get screwed. I think that'd be great.
Yeah. I think when that does happen, it adds to like that feeling of like failure, because it's this opportunity that you thought was there and then it wasn't, and that's like so painful. So like to share that, it's not only the rejection of losing like money or like being duped and being embarrassed about that, but it's also like, oh, my art really isn't that good. Or like, true. People really don't want this thing.
Hopefully you have artist friends at least that you could share it with, because even in a smaller community like that could, create a positive effect where people are like more aware in that community. So ideally, yeah.
Well, and people do. I think people are more apt to like kind of share things on different websites. Maybe not like giving their identity, but Google can be your friend in these situations. Whether you're, you can Google like the organization that the people say they're a part of, or like I've had many people reach out to me that were definitely like either scammy or like just trying to get money out of just the fact that I want to be a podcaster. And just Google can be your friend. Even like just copying and pasting like part of the email into Google, like you'll see that people will like post the exact same thing, like, and you'll see that people are sharing like their experiences, but maybe like in more kind of anonymous thing. So Google can be your friend for searching for scammers before you send out a check or send out money.
Very true.
So I wanted to also talk about promoting your art, because you've been talking about this a lot recently. So could you talk about kind of your strategies for people that are just starting out to kind of promote their art, like where they should be going and what they should be kind of thinking about? Okay,
my favorite piece of advice, like the one thing that matters, I think, is to start with what you love when you're promoting. So whatever turns you on, like if you think that Instagram is the bee's knees, like just focus on that to begin with. Or maybe Twitter is where you feel like you found your community. So use that. Whatever it is, that's the one you're going to focus on, because the most important thing you can do with your marketing is be consistent in whatever it is that you're doing. And you're going to be consistent if you like it already. So if you're having trouble and you're like, I don't like any of that stuff, well, then maybe online promotion is not for you to begin with. Like maybe you start by throwing events if that's what you like. You like in real life stuff, or just there's something that you must like surrounding your work and other people, and just focus on making that happen and happen on a regular basis. After that, the online world is powerful. So if you're not into it, I'm sorry, but you'll probably have to get into it at some point. And with that, you're going to want to have lots of documentation of your work. It used to be that there was like a handful of photos of some famous artist in the 70s when they were first starting out because their one friend was a photographer. But now we all have the power of making that documentation on a daily basis on our own. Most people have cameras in their smartphones, if nowhere else. And you should be constantly documenting your own stuff. It's still cool to have a photographer friend come in and take some pictures because it's a different eye looking at what you're doing and seeing different things about what you're doing. But, even if you don't have a photographer friend, there's no excuse. You probably have access to a camera, and you need to be figuring out like a kind of rhythm for what you're documenting on a daily basis. And maybe ask yourself every morning, like, what am I going to document about my work today? And then in the evening, what did I do? To sort of get into the habit of really making it something that you do. Like for me, I will always take pictures of my paintings in process every day if I've worked on them the day before, so that I've done at least some amount of documenting. I don't know necessarily what that's going to go to. Like, am I even going to use that photo? I don't know, but I've done it. I've checked it off my daily list of my daily routine.
Absolutely. And there's something about so like my mom took a ton of pictures when I was growing up. And then I guess I took like some pictures in college myself, but then my wife, she's a photographer, and she basically documents like all the important stuff. Like we just had a wedding this weekend. She made sure we had a picture from that. Like she has that mindset. So she's like going to take pictures of what we ate, what we just cooked, she documents that stuff. So I am like completely out of I don't take pictures anymore basically. But I think there's like a huge power that comes when you, and I think it holds a lot of people back because it feels like this like kind of like cocky thing, or like this thing that you shouldn't do, like of actually like taking a selfie of you doing the thing that you're doing, whether it's whatever the kind of creative passion is. But there's like a huge power that comes in being able to see that, to see not only the progress that you make through your own eyes, like seeing the art, seeing the progress, but like just seeing you along this path, you along this journey, you doing the work. And to be able to document that is like a special thing, and you won't be able to get those, not only those memories back, but it also inspires you so much to continue going. You're like, look at that guy, look at that girl, go do that work. You know what I mean? So I think it's a really important thing, and it does help to, promote yourself as well, to show people, like, it's a really inspiring thing to see like you packaging your art that you're about to sell, that you're about to send out, that you did sell. I don't know. There's so much power in that.
It's interesting too that you say that selfies are viewed maybe by some artists as like too, like you're putting yourself out there too much, or it's like too not humble enough, or whatever it is that's stopping people. I'm going to date myself here. When I was first starting out as an artist, which wasn't that long ago, but it feels like eons ago in terms of internet promotion, I had business cards right from the very beginning, because I was like, this is something that I don't know why it came into my head, but I like, even my senior art show at university, I had business cards with me at the opening. I had people, like artists, saying to me, wow, you think a lot of yourself. And I was like, what? Business cards? Or they weren't saying it to me. They were saying like, people have told me when I've carried business cards that I think a lot of myself. They were doing that thing where they were telling me the thing that they'd been told, but saying it sort of like with one remove, like pretending like they didn't think it, And, so my point is that while there may be still pockets of people who are like, artists shouldn't carry business cards, that's too businessy, we're mostly over that. And I think that this idea that artists shouldn't do selfies, it's not humble enough or whatever, I think that it will evolve, if it hasn't already, to where, no, people don't think that you're full of yourself if you do that. It's just a part of the culture of being an artist, which isn't to say that you have to do it, just that, don't think that you're being not humble if you do it. That's all.
Right. Plus, in like this world of technology and this world of like very low attention span, we just scroll through things on Instagram. We just like meet people in everyday life and we move on with our lives. So like to be able to like be like, here, remember me. You know what I mean? Not only like making that point to try to be remembered, but also like literally you're giving them a physical thing to see later, like as they're clearing out their pockets or whatever, and be like, oh yeah, let me like go dive deeper into Gwenn and what she does and what she
You just
sells.
made me realize that actually the daily or regular posts on social media are the new version of the business card. Because a lot of people won't necessarily take that physical thing home, but they will have it in their stream again and again because you're posting it every day. They'll have you and links to your stuff. So it's like, that's a way to view those regular postings on social media, is as you're giving people a business card every day.
Absolutely. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, you also have another strategy of using a calendar that really helps you out and helps me too. I'm not as good at it as I should be because I think things just pile up and I get overwhelmed. But can you talk about the importance of your calendar?
Yeah, so it's a marketing calendar, and once a month I sit down and I plan out basically what I'm going to post every day. If it's every day, it's not always every single day. So it's things like, oh, I know I'm going to be speaking at this event. I'm going to post a picture of myself from before I ever did a talk at any event and say, like, this is just from, X number of years ago. And this person in this picture, who's me, but from years ago, had never spoken. And now I'm being flown to Montreal to speak, So being aware of what's on your calendar already, like that I'm going to speak or that I'm opening a show or that I'm whatever it is, or even if it's like a holiday, so everyone's celebrating this particular thing, and then sort of building around that, like what could you post on those days around that are on that theme. And then really it's just about having something on your calendar on a regular basis, maybe every day, hopefully close to every day, so that in the morning when you wake up, you're like, okay, that's on my list, along with documenting my work. Because remember, I already said that. But one of the things that you should be doing is sharing something, even if it's something small, like just a picture of you, making your work, whatever, something simple. You should be sharing something every day. And that way, if it's already on your calendar, you just have to do it. You don't have to think about what am I going to share that day. You just take care of it.
Yeah, it puts you in that kind of habit. We were talking before the show about, because last time you were talking about doing a handstand.
Yeah.
And we were talking about just like how location and just like time of day has so much to do with like being in a habit and doing something that's
let's be clear. Let's tell the full story.
Okay.
We can tell the full story, which is that you asked me if I had actually succeeded in learning how to do a handstand since, like 2 years ago when last time we really talked. And I had to admit that I had not learned, but that I had a really good excuse, which is that I was living in a place where a handstand was just something that I did every time I got up and got out of my studio. It was like there was this one spot in that house where I was living where I would just do it. And so I would see that spot and I would feel bad if I didn't do it at that spot because that's what I did at that spot. I did my handstand. And then I moved. And in my new house, there's no spot to do the handstand. So it's not my fault. It's that my environment is not built to make that habit happen. And so the point is to build environments where you have like that thing is going to happen sort of almost automatically. Right.
That's what I was going to say is that my work schedule changed. I used to work nights. Now I'm like afternoons. So I haven't posted I very sporadically posted on Instagram. I usually post like 3 times a day. For a couple of years, I was posting like 3 times a day. And then for the past like 3 weeks to a month, I've been barely posting at all because like my routine got completely screwed up. I was doing it like, okay, I'm on my way to work. I'm going to do my post and then I'm going to do it like on my first break or, you know what I mean? Like having like specific times of day. So when your schedule does get screwed up or you get in a funk like me where I'm like, oh man, like it's been 3 weeks. Like what's the point? No, just get right back into that habit, like make a new habit for yourself, find a new handstand spot for yourself and just get back into it so that you can just like get the ball rolling again. Because when you do lose that momentum, especially on like platforms like Instagram or Facebook, if you're not posting every day, especially YouTube, I found too, you need to be like posting every day on YouTube or else they don't care about you anymore. That also goes into knowing like your platform that you choose. I know you promote choosing one thing to start at least. And I think that's really important too for people just starting out is pick that one platform, learn a lot about it, really get to know that platform and that audience, and then like really put your efforts into it. And I think that's really important.
It's true.
you also talked about how location, I think you did like a live stream for this.
I did.
Yeah, how location impacts your art career.
Yeah. So weird things like I now live on the East Coast where there is actual sunshine as opposed to the Pacific Northwest.
Yes, sun.
And I didn't even realize that this was a thing. Like when cause I lived in the Pacific Northwest for 20 some years. And then before that it was San Francisco. So it was also gray. And I didn't realize how that sort of, diffused light coming through lots of clouds affected how I saw the world, how I even understood what's beautiful, like what feels like a nice day to me, feels like a day with that diffused light, just things like that. And now that I live in this land of like super high contrast because it's a lot of sunshine, I'm realizing that it affects my psyche, it affects my work. So things like that. And I'm not saying that I need to always live in somewhere where it's raining constantly. I don't need that because I am starting to learn to enjoy this other sort of weather. But the point is that I didn't realize anyway what was affecting me about a location until I changed. And it's helped me to be better at noticing the new stuff here as well. Like, we are really shaped by our environment, I guess is the upshot of it. And it doesn't mean that you have to be in New York or LA or wherever to be making the art and making it happen for reals. It just means that wherever you're at, you should be aware that it is affecting you. And, are these things that you want to have be affecting you? Like, for example, where I'm living in New Jersey, the art markets, like where you set up a tent and then people wander around and look at lots of different artists' work. That's a huge part of a lot of artists' business in this area. And I've never done it, and I have no desire to do it because the thought of being social for like 6 or 8 hours a day for like a full weekend, I'm not that person. So it's just not something that I'm going to incorporate. But the artists around here they're just like, it's I know someone who's just sort of starting their career, and they're like, of course, they just sign up for that track and basically start doing this thing of these almost every weekend right now is with another festival, another market. And this person is not even aware that that's because they're in this location that it's so prevalent. Like that if they were somewhere else, it wouldn't be the track that they sign up for automatically. And so just being aware of what it is in your environment that's shaping you, I think is important so that you can make choices. Like for example, I'm not going to start doing the markets just because I'm in a situation where I'm supposed to be doing it, So yeah, location, it does affect us, but it doesn't have to rule us as long as we are aware. I think that awareness is really a big part of everything that I want to do in my work. Like, I think about a friend of mine recently had a huge break for their career, and it didn't really go how they wanted it to, or it just wasn't everything that they wanted it. And then they're like looking for that feeling again. They're looking for that break again. And just being aware that, like, for example, like a break comes from the outside. So you can't manufacture it again except by, constantly putting your work out there and just being available for those things to come to you. But also being aware of how to make like a big break your own, instead of, waiting for something to happen, being like, okay, so what do I have to offer? Who can I reach out to? And then when something does happen, something good does happen, like, how do you translate it into something, for you? Like, I think about, I'm sorry, I'm totally rambling, but I think I'm still on the question. But anyway, like, I wrote for Professional Artist Magazine for a while. And when I first got that gig, I was just thrilled to be paid to write about art because I've been writing about art for years and I hadn't ever been really paid for it. So it was a big deal. And then eventually that ended because the magazine was too scared to publish an article about discrimination in the art world because of their advertisers or whatever their values are. I didn't totally understand why that happened.
That money.
They were like all gung-ho about it. And then I actually submitted the articles and they're like, no, I don't know why you would say that there's even discrimination in the art world. So whatever. The point is that it didn't work. But so it was a big bummer because it was like this part of my income that was like, I can't work with these people anymore. They don't share my values, whatever it is. So that was a big bummer, but still being able to take from that break of having written for them for a while, like, what did I learn from that situation? Well, I learned that I can actually do writing like that. I learned how to do writing like that, how to work with an editor. I learned to not be afraid of talking to other artists. Is that a weird thing? Like, I before I was working for this magazine, it wasn't like I was afraid to talk to other artists who I had like a friendly something with, but I was maybe not as willing to just reach out to artists who were strangers. And I certainly was leery of promoting artists' work, artists that I didn't know. And I think that that was in part because I really want to respect, a lot of people are they're very into their copyright. And to the point where they, they'll say on their website, like, don't use my art without asking permission. Well, you can say that, but that's not actually what your copyright, that's not actually something that your copyright gives you the right to enforce. As long as someone is making commentary about your work, when they show your work, they're actually allowed to show your work. But I used to be really nervous about it. I was like, well, they specifically said, don't use my art. And while I still want to be respectful of people, I also am like, no, I'm doing a good by sharing someone's work and sharing commentary about it. And it seems like a small thing and something that I shouldn't have been nervous about, but it's huge for me and it has changed the way that I interact with artists online. And being able, like, feeling free now to share other artists' work has opened up huge things for me, because when you share about other artists' work, it's like you're sharing a piece of yourself, because it goes back to what we were talking about before about what is truly successful art. It's that art that feels like it's almost like it's more yours than the artist's. And anyway.
And it all goes back to that whole like communication, like this whole like sharing thing. Like the whole point of making the art was to affect somebody in some way. And then when you can share the effect that some other artist's work has had on you, it's just like, it's like that song, the more we get together, it's like, exactly. It's like that's what it's all supposed to be about. The whole copyright thing does. I mean, people can listen to your first interview. We talked about that in depth, about the whole copyright thing and your opinion on that. And I also share that opinion. But yeah, it's like, it's one of those weird things where it's like, because I share every other post on Instagram for me is, somebody else's art, right? Whether they've tagged the show, like tagged me and want it to be shared. I encourage anybody to tag me with anything you do, especially stuff that the show has helped to motivate you to create. But like, there's also just other artists that I follow that are just amazing artists that I just want, like you said, to share their work. But there's always that feeling like, oh, am I not allowed to do this? I always check their, little profile, right? Like whatever kind of profile you can get in Instagram, to make sure that they don't say specifically like, don't repost my work. But yeah, it always kind of freaks me out too.
It's like, yeah, and it's the funny thing is that it's meant to do the opposite, right? Copyright, I think most artists are adopting it as a way to feel safer sharing their work, and so to do it more, but it ends up shutting it down, and that's the unfortunate part.
Right. Well, and kind of circling back to getting an opportunity that you think is going to not necessarily change your life, but change things, at least for the short term. And then it kind of not happening the way you think it's going to happen. You mentioned a friend, and then you also mentioned an example that happened to you where it just didn't work out. So what can people take from things that happen like that? Like things where their hopes are high and then kind of get shot down, or like you're back to square one and you're like, when is the next opportunity going to come? Like, what would you say to somebody in that position?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to think is, or to realize, is that there's a lot of opportunities that maybe aren't huge, going to launch your career in this massive way, but they're still really important. They are connections that are being sort of solidified with someone that you've been interacting with, and then they give you this offer, and it maybe isn't as big as you want, as much money, not as much prestige or whatever it is, but it's still you building a rapport with that person. So I guess maybe viewing smaller opportunities as still worthwhile and not really focusing on that big, huge one that's going to be the end all be all of everything. So there's that, really celebrating the smaller opportunities, and then really just owning it. Like whatever has been given to you. Like I think a lot about, I was invited in 2014 to speak in Geneva at their TEDx conference. Big deal. That means that the TED organization is going to promote the talk. So really big deal, right? And I was like, this is it. This is the big thing. And then pulled myself back from it, ultimately because it wasn't as big of a thing. For whatever reason, The TED organization didn't promote my video. Like they didn't have it on their site like they normally do. And so it didn't like blow up. I mean, it was great. Like I made lots of great connections, but it didn't blow up the way that I thought it was going to. And I realized like, it doesn't really matter because I made those connections with people through it. The video is online, is available. They've now put it on their site. And so while it didn't become the big thing that I thought it was going to, it did still make shifts in my life that are important. I also ended up writing a book about the topic of the talk. And the reason why I wrote that book is because as I was trying to sit down to figure out what I was going to talk about, I wanted to talk about free culture, uncopywriting in some way. And I wrote down like 12 different things. And I was like, I can only do one of these, but I want to write, I want these 12 things to exist. And so I don't know if it's actually 12, but it's whatever. Those were the chapters of the book that I ended up writing on the same topic. So that made it mine. You know, it was like, whatever happens from TEDx doesn't really matter because the TEDx opportunity turned into a book that I needed to write. So I think that, yeah, taking back control in those situations where it feels really like something from outside is making you, taking it back and being like, you know, okay, so what am I making of it? I think that's important.
Right. In hindsight, it's always easy to see like, oh, like that's why this thing that I thought was a failure happened to me, was so that I could get to this point. And I know that's like kind of woo woo, and it's like, you know, it doesn't help anybody that's in the middle of like a failure or in the middle of like a hard time. But I don't know, it's like you have to see everything as like a step, and maybe it's like a step down, but like so that you could get to this other step. I don't know. It's so important to just kind of keep going and just trust that you're like on this like journey. As long as you're like still putting in the work and still looking for other opportunities and taking advantage of kind of the opportunities that are given to you, that's all that really matters. And just trust that you're going to get to where you're supposed to get. It sounds so like...
No, I think it's really good. And I think part of the reason why is because it's almost like you're being your own art historian. Like you're almost observing your life as you're having it and thinking like, oh, this is how this piece fits together. And it, I don't know, maybe it doesn't work for everybody, but for me, it makes me feel like there's more of a purpose and more of a, like it's more okay when the crappy stuff happens because you're like, well, this is going to turn into something more interesting. So. Right.
Well, I found you through the TED Talk. So,
yeah. So
there you go. Your creative push. Here you are.
I
mean, I don't know what better success there is than to be on this show.
Nice. No, it's true. It's true. And watching your creative push evolve as it has over the last couple of years has been really fun. And again, going back to what we were talking about with the bands, like that, you know, they were yours to begin with. Like I have a little bit of that feeling about your creative push. But it makes me happy still that, you know, that it has grown and evolved. And really it's a beautiful thing to be able to see that from the beginning too, you know?
Well, thanks, Gwen. You're one of the OGs.
Yeah.
So. Well, you talked about, the kind of that magazine not letting you talk about discrimination in the art world. So, well, here you have an opportunity now to talk about it because I don't have any advertisers, at least yet. So feel free.
Well, I don't remember exactly how I ended up breaking it down, but I ended up talking to a handful of artists, including Mark Anthony Martinez, who at the time was not just a visual artist, was also working, I think he was a curator at some big important art venue in Texas. So he sort of could tell from the artist perspective and from the institutional perspective about stuff. He was really, I think, key to being able to write that article, look him up. He's amazing. He identifies as brown. So he talked about what it was like to be a brown artist, who talks about race in his work and also brings it up in his institutional role, and how ultimately what ends up happening is that, white coworkers or white colleagues in whatever situation end up stopping. They don't want to listen anymore because they're tired of hearing about race, and that becomes one more closing down of possibilities as an artist of color. He had lots of good stuff to say, but I think that ultimately what I realized was important when you are dealing with discrimination, when someone's telling you to make the lips less full in the mural that you're making, less full being the implication that it looks too, quote, ethnic, or when you're called an art chick, or, whatever it is, however it is that you're being sort of put down or pushed aside. The important thing to do is, I think, to realize that you're not by yourself. You are trying to maybe interact with a gatekeeper who is doing, whether clearly or not, doing something. Like maybe they've said something to you, but maybe they're just stonewalling you, and you're not really clear whether it's because they don't like your work, or because they don't like your color, or your size, or your level of ability, whatever it is. They've decided that they're not interested in you, but you don't have to deal with that alone. You can reach out to other people in your community. Like, I had something happen that originally actually was the inspiration for this article, which was that I was invited to show at a number of local public libraries in my county, and my county is pretty right wing. And so they had seen my work, they had invited me, ostensibly everything should be fine. But then I wanted to show some of my work that was about homosexuality and gender and sex diversity in the natural world. And instead of just being like, actually, we can't show that here because it makes us uncomfortable and we don't want to have to explain your work to patrons, they just stopped writing me back. And it was very frustrating. I'm telling the story as if it happened, quickly. Oh, that sucked. But it actually was drawn out over several weeks, where I had to realize, oh, they don't like queer people. I had to they wouldn't say that because they knew better than to actually say that. But that's what they were communicating. And it was this slow process of oh, I'm being discriminated against. Okay, that's what's going on. That is actually what's going on. And then going through that process again of when we were talking about the scammers of are they really being this mean? Yes, I believe they are.
It's really happening.
Yes. And I was talking about it with a friend of mine who runs a gallery in this same county. And he's like, oh, I could have talked to them for you, and I never would have thought to reach out to someone else in the community who might be able to act as a kind of mediator, even if it's not going to resolve and that the show is going to happen, but just to resolve in the sense that we all know better what's going on. And it's not like I wanted to force that art on a venue that couldn't handle it. I would rather have just been told. I'm kind of getting off topic, but the point is that you're not by yourself. That's what I'm saying. And ultimately, I didn't end up showing with either library, but I did have a good experience with the second library where they were much more direct with me about what they needed and wanted. And so I think a lot of discrimination, although it's changing again with Trump, but I think that a lot of discrimination still happens more sort of as a stonewalling, where people, instead of saying, you know what, I don't like your whatever it is about you, your identity or your appearance, so I'm not going to show you. They're not going to actually say things or use slurs or whatever. They're just going to not talk to you. When that's the case, you need to realize that you don't have to go through this by yourself. There are people in the community that will talk for you and will force the conversations to happen if you want it, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. And you might, I don't know what your experience was, but you might just realize that you don't want to be a part of that anyway. Even
right.
If your friend would have talked to them, do you really want to show your stuff there anymore? You know what I mean? If you don't have the same values and whatever, even if it can kind of be made to work, that might not be a relationship you want to continue anyway.
Exactly. I should say, I'm white. I'm also straight passing. So I don't deal with a lot of this discrimination on a regular basis. And that was the first situation where I had been out as a queer artist, so out also professionally. And so that was my first living of it. And it sucks. I got to tell you, every time things like this happen, I've dealt with discrimination as a female before, but never as a queer person who's out. And the levels of sucking just are impossible to totally communicate. And when I think about what it would be like to be a person of color and to be dealing with this stuff on a more regular basis and in just a more pervasive manner, I literally don't know how people function in this world. And I would like to put that out there to other white artists specifically, please be aware of the people of color in your community and amplify their voices, make sure that they are heard. And yes, it's hard to be an artist of any color, but yeah, I would put out that please be aware that I think it's harder to be an artist of color.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to be an artist, like you said. Like, so yeah, imagine all of that extra kind of bullshit. Bullshit's the theme of the thing that you have to deal with.
So that's it. When the return bullshit. So yeah, it's good.
Oh yeah, perfect title. Well, the other thing I wanted to say too was, as you grow as an artist and as people start reaching out to you, to remember how you felt like when you were either ignored or mistreated, and just never do that to other people.
Yes.
Like one of the things, like some people reach out to either be on the show or like have like I've had people that have reached out to me and have had like their clients or something like that ended up being a perfect fit, and then they reach out again. They're like, "How about this person?" I'm just like, instead of ignore, like it's so much easier. Like I understand completely like how easy it is to just like ignore that email, or just just kind of delete it and just forget about it. But it's like, I think so much better to just reach back out and say, it's not the right fit. It's so hard to do. But like, it's not the right fit for this reason. Be as nice as possible. But like being left kind of hanging is like kind of the worst feeling. It's like this like loop that isn't closed.
Totally.
I think it's important to do that. And then you don't know kind of from that where else you can go. So I think it's just so important to just like, don't leave those ties untied,
It's just a good professional tip all around. I think that I have trouble with it as well, being on top of emails. For me, it's actually the worst is Facebook messages. I just don't check them very often. And so I always end up feeling like a colossal jerk when I finally do, because I'm like, oh, this has been here for weeks,
Yeah.
So whatever it is that is your particular, area of trouble, like I get it. It's hard. But you're right. It is so important to not contribute to the stonewalling of the universe, because there's so much of it that happens, especially in the creative fields, I think.
Yeah. And I think people respect and appreciate it too. So just have that in mind as you're kind of writing back.
Yeah.
Gwenn, this has, of course, been awesome, as I thought it would be. But you know how we end the show. And I know you've done this once before, but maybe we could do version 2.0 of the final push.
I don't even remember what I said last time, so hopefully
you know what? I don't either. So you know what? I'm sure if you said the same thing, it'd be beautiful, and people need to be reminded anyway. But yeah, you know the drill.
Yeah. Okay. So I think my current focus is remembering myself and helping other artists to remember that what you're doing is astonishing, truly. Most people, when what they do for their job is like they're filling a seat that already exists. They are a candidate that meets the qualifications, but they are filling something like a position that already exists, right? And just about anybody with similar qualifications could fill that position like they do. But an artist is creating a whole new seat, a whole new position in the world. And that position won't be filled by anybody else. That's the whole point, is that you are making something completely new in the world. And so just don't ever forget that what you're doing is so different from what most people do in their professional lives, and that it's going to create all kinds of issues for you probably, because people don't necessarily understand that, but also all kinds of opportunities. You are this new, completely unique thing in the world. Never forget it.
Woo! Yeah, that definitely wasn't what you said the first time.
Okay, good.
That was awesome. I love that. Perfect. Gwenn, thank you so much for coming on the show again.
Thank
and
you.
Just for being an awesome artist, an awesome kind of contributor to the artistic community, and just like sharing all your stuff. I'm a supporter of you on Patreon. I suggest that everybody else become a supporter so they can make sure that they get all of the stuff that you put out there. You do document yourself, but you also kind of document your thoughts very, very well. And I think it's very useful for any kind of creative person out there.
You're the best. I feel pushed today. I am going to make the best work because of this.
Yes,
really.
Pushed.
It's good. It's so good.
Good. All right, and everybody can find Gwenn on her website, which is GwennSeemel.com. That's GwennSeemel.com. On Instagram, she is Gwenn Paints. And on Patreon, she is Gwenn. It's like patreon.com/Gwenn, right?
Yep, that's it.
That's an easy one. Also, your videos, I always watch. So you do an English version and a French version. And I always watch the French version too to try to like remember what you said in the English version and try to learn French. But it's not where I maybe picked up a couple words, but it's always such a beautiful language. So I always love watching you do that too.
I should keep that in mind. I should do a whole series of videos that's specifically for that in purpose. And
yes,
see if
you
I
should.
Can make that happen.
Teach everyone French. Oh man, Gwenn, thank you so much.
Thank you.
A huge thank you to Gwenn once again. It's always a pleasure to speak with her. Ton of great stuff from this episode, but I just wanted to touch back on that idea of documenting yourself along your art journey, of taking pictures of yourself doing the work. It seems weird. It might feel weird at first, but it is a great thing, not just for social media, but for yourself to get out of your own head and have an out-of-body experience, kind of, to see yourself doing this thing, to see yourself putting in the work, and to see yourself going along this journey. Having that visual image of yourself doing the work will give you that extra inspiration to continue to do the work. And not only that, but it will give you an extra talking point to share with your audience. Last week, we talked with Shayla Maddox about the same thing, about sharing your journey with your Patreon audience. And that is what I am to Gwenn. I am her Patreon audience, and I get to see her kind of progress shots. I get to see her thought process as she goes through her own creative journey. So think about doing that, not just for yourself, but for your audience. And at the very least, it will give you lasting memories to remember this time when you were just a little baby artist trying to make your way in the world. You'll be able to see more clearly how far you've come, and it will give you that inspiration to continue to go further. Next week is Christmas time, so our episode is going to be a little bit special. It's going to be my conversation with Daniel Reyes. Daniel is an award-winning TV producer with nearly 2 decades of experience, but he comes on the show to talk about how he almost died and what that experience led him to want to do with his life, to help people leave their stories, experiences, and wisdom for future generations. If you want to find out about Daniel, you can head to his website, heirloomfilms.net. We'll have that linked up at the show notes page, as well as everything else we talked about today with Gwenn at yourcreativepush.com/270. And we'll also have linked up there the article about discrimination that Gwenn wrote. She ended up posting it on her own blog, as well as a video about why she quit Pro Mag. And also, January is coming up, and if you remember last year, we did that initiative of doing your entire New Year's resolution, that big project that you want to do in January. I'm going to call it Cramuary. So January is coming up pretty soon, so if you have ideas for that big project that you want to do, start preparing, start getting what you need to do. You know what that is. Start getting that all ready so that on January 1st you can hit the ground running. I'd love to hear what you are planning to do for Cramuary. I am writing a book, the Your Creative Push book, but you can head to the Facebook group at yourcreativepush.com/group to share what you are thinking about doing. Or you can do the hashtag Cramuary, CRAMUARY, on Instagram or Twitter to share your thoughts about that. And hopefully you are getting excited, maybe a little bit nervous, but very excited to get that big project finally done. But that is all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we will be here for you next week if you need the push again. I love you all so much. Happy holidays if you don't tune in next week. Happy New Year if you don't tune in the week after. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks so much for getting your work done this year. All right, go get some more done. Bye, guys. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.